Hello again and welcome once more to the Better Learning Podcast. My name is Carl. I am really grateful for you once again taking the time to join me and explore with me ideas for how we can better accessibility to learning in our practice together. So, here we go. Briefly recapping what we talked about in the last episode, the Better Learning Podcast, we discussed why it might be important to improve accessibility to learning. And we're going to expand on that a bit today. We're going to explore some reasons why you, as a teacher, as a parent, as a guardian, as a line manager, in some way connected to education, if you're a stakeholder in education, why might you be interested in accessibility to learning? So the big focus of today's episode is, why should you want to make this change? Why should you, particularly if you're a teacher, put so much effort into considering accessibility to learning? Well, as we well covered in the previous episode, if you can't access learning, you simply can't reap the benefits of it. And so, putting this in a different perspective, you could well have written the most amazingly detailed and comprehensive curricula. Your scheme of work, your lesson plans could meet in great detail the needs set out by the syllabus. All the key criteria for development are there and present. However, none of this takes into account the diverse needs of the modern learner. To put a different context in the reason for the need for this change in education, I'm sure we're all familiar with the meme, the series of animals, the monkey, the penguin, the elephant and the goldfish. And there's a tree in the background, a teacher in the foreground saying, everyone has to take the same exam for fair selection, please climb that tree. And that's the reason for this drive to make education more accessible, because I can certainly relate to most of those animals in that picture. But I also need to address your needs, because what a hypocrite would I be if I didn't consider your accessibility to this change whilst talking about the accessibility to education. So, what is in it for you as a teacher, as someone who works in education, or perhaps someone who's training as a teacher? The most obvious answer to that is that a more accessible curriculum, lesson plan, and set of resources means greater success in terms of outcomes for learners, which of course in turn reflects better on you professionally. It's also worth commenting on the behavioural implications of a more accessible curriculum for our learners. It stands to reason that if a curriculum considers your needs and how you access learning, you're going to see more engagement from learners and therefore fewer behavioural issues. And who doesn't want to see, fewer behavioural issues, post-COVID in our learners? And if we're going to continue considering the needs and responses that are possible from the implementation of accessibility to learning on our learners, I think we should consider actually that differentiation is not quite the fix-all solution for learning needs that perhaps it's been presented to us as. If we think about differentiation as being hierarchical, there's different levels of learners' understanding, and we're pigeonholing them, we're classifying them, we're putting labels on them, when actually it's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot more rhizomatic, it's a lot more holistic. We need to consider that actually maybe a learner isn't good at just sitting and looking at the board, looking at a book. Maybe even they're not good at being practical or sitting and discussing, or, we need to consider all of these elements. And differentiation doesn't do that, but accessibility to learning does. So, having outlined some reasons why you might want to engage with this change to accessibility that I am proposing, I appreciate I haven't convinced all of you yet. In fact, statistically speaking, the majority of you I haven't convinced yet. So, I'd like to address the resistance that some of you may be feeling towards this change, and explore maybe some very valid reasons why you shouldn't want to change, because change represents a lot of aspects in life that make us feel insecure about ourselves, both professionally and personally, frankly. So I think it would be right to acknowledge that. As Bob Kegan well articulates in his book Immunity to Change, there is a fear of loss when we talk about change, when we talk about doing something different, when we challenge what we believe to be fundamentally true about ourselves or the world. And that's completely understandable. That is part of the human condition. So the biggest fear you might be facing here is, how much time is this going to cost me? And my answer to that is, as little time as you want to spend, and certainly no more time than you would spend planning your lessons and your schemes of work anyway. This is not the kind of change where we throw away all of our knowledge, our books, our experience, and our expertise. It's quite the opposite. We're building on that because it is invaluable. So just to clarify, I'm not suggesting you spend any extra time that you are unwilling or unable to spend in your planning and your development of your curriculum and your lessons. I'm just seeking a different approach to how we consider the engagement and accessibility of what we're planning and what we're teaching. So another aspect of some potential resistance you may be feeling to this change is simply that it's new, it's unfamiliar. You don't have maybe a point of reference on which to build understanding on what we're talking about here, that cognitive template, and that's fine. Mezirow states in his works on transformative learning that the first step to deep learning is the disorientating dilemma. So if that's what you're feeling right now, actually you're already making progress. And so if you are feeling uneasy, scared of what you're facing here, what you're considering, then I applaud you, because you're already taking some steps towards better accessibility. And actually considering for a moment on a different level, how often are we introducing new ideas to our students and expecting them to engage with it? So yes, as much as this is a new idea for us, they're constantly bombarded with new ideas, and if we're able to create a safe or holding space for them to grasp onto these new concepts and build the connections on how all of this works, then surely we can do it for ourselves and indeed for each other. In fact, building on this idea of a safe space, it's also worth noting that you could well be feeling a fear of making a mistake, of getting it wrong in some imagined or factual way as you're trying out this change. But again, using a bit of empathy here, some meta view, if you're familiar with coaching. Put yourself in the place of your learners. You expect them to grapple with these new and fantastic ideas. You expect them to make some mistakes in some way, some false steps, and you create a safe space for them in order for them to understand why something maybe isn't right, why something doesn't work, and indeed why something does work. So to get to the heart of what I'm really trying to say here is you're going to learn a lot more if you do try something new on whatever scale that feels comfortable to you. And, perhaps it doesn't go as you expect. You're going to learn a lot more than if you don't try. We set that standard for our learners. I think we can afford to set that standard for ourselves as well. And particularly in teaching where there's a lack of career progression that is laid out for us, particularly in terms of continual professional development, I think we should take ownership of that. And this is me giving you permission to do that in the same way that I give myself permission and authority to talk about this change. I'm giving you permission to take charge of your development. So, in closing, I, as always, am eternally grateful for you listening to me here on the Better Learning podcast. I hope I have succeeded in some way in instilling within you the desire to explore this change. And next time we will be going in some depth into the knowledge that you will require to make this change. Thank you.